Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for giving us your time in this Friday afternoon to discuss a very important topic for us. We welcome you all to the webinar that is organized to celebrate 20 years of ALDA. This is one of the four webinars that we are organizing in order to celebrate 20 years of existence and activities. And this webinar is actually on the topic of the role of local authorities in the EU accession and Berlin process with the geographical scope of Western Balkans. Today, we are going to discuss the topic of EU integration and local authorities in the Western Balkans. We will start our webinar with the intervention of our president, ALDA president, Mr. Oriano Otočan, followed by the presentation by Secretary General of ALDA, Mrs. Antonella Valmorbida. For today's topic, we have four keynote speakers. We are happy that we have among us Mr. Andrej Zernovski, the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of North Macedonia. We have also among us a representative of the European Commission DG NEAR, Mr. Colin Wolfe, that is the head of the Unit for Western Balkans Regional Cooperation and Programs. We have also Nataša Vučković, the director of the Foundation Center for Democracy from Serbia, and Mr. Nikola Dobroslavić, the president of the Croatian Delegation to the European Committee of the Regions, also the prefect of Dubrovnik-Neretva County. Following their interventions, we will have time for answers among the audience for the Q&A time, and the webinar will be closed by a short session from the Secretary General Antonella Valmorbida. So without further ado, I would give the floor to Mr. Oriano Otočan, the president of ALDA. Oriano, please.
Hvala Ivana, thank you Ivana for your introduction, and I hope as previous webinars that we had yesterday and the day before yesterday, that also here today we are going to have a nice and interesting discussion with many good and nice, interesting opinion to share with our members and all other participants who are attending this webinar. I would like to greet, first of all, the speakers and our Secretary General, and Ivana, you. So, Mr. Colin Wolfe, Mr. Andrej Zernovski, gospođo Nataša Vučković I gospodina Nikolu Dobroslavića, ako se uključio. I will speak in English, but I'm also coming from this area. I'm coming from Croatia, from region of Istria, and I've been working for many years in enlargement process. Better to say, in the European integration process. I was responsible for European affairs in my region, for EU funds and many other things regarding international cooperation. So in this way, I also started to work with ALDA, but ALDA started to work as ALDA even before that. We are now celebrating 20 years of ALDA, but local democracy agencies in that time, called local democracy embassies, started to work in the mid-90s because of the problem in that time, war and everything, all bad things connected with the war during the 90s in the Western Balkans, in countries of former Yugoslavia. And also in my region was a local democracy agency. And I remember, and I told this yesterday and the day before yesterday, but it's interesting to say also to people who attend today that the first ever international seminar that I attended was a national seminar organized by a local democracy embassy in my region, in the municipality of Vertenello, in Italian because it's bilingual, Vertenello and Bertonigla. So ALDA in some way started before 20 years. Also we had other, in that time, that still exist local democracy agencies, but ALDA started as an initiative of Council of Europe to coordinate these local democracy agencies, which also has been some kind of initiative of Council of Europe and the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities of Council of Europe. Europe. Now, today, ALDA is something different. ALDA is bigger. ALDA is 20-year-old, and we cannot celebrate with the birthday cake, but we can celebrate in this way. We decided to celebrate in a way which is available for all people around the world today, because we planned also to have a General Assembly in Istria, in my region, in May. We postponed, so we will celebrate or online or directly meeting the people in Brussels in October. So I also invite all of you who can to come if this is possible. If not, to attend our General Assembly in an online way. So this is a great year for us, but this is not the beginning. This is not the end. We plan to work for the future. We plan our strategy for the future. We plan to adapt our new strategy for the next 4 years. But I expect that in the next 20 years, we will have also other results, nice results, and that we have also something to celebrate. I will not go in the details about what we succeeded, because this is part of the presentation of our Secretary General, but just a few figures. Now ALDA is working in more than 40 countries. ALDA has more than 350 members, hundreds of projects, and ALDA has a big staff with more than 40 people working, and with the offices, one of the offices in Skopje, where our director is Ivana, but we have also offices in Vicenza, in Brussels, in Strasbourg, and also one office in Moldavia, Republic of Moldova, and an office for the Mediterranean area in Tunisia. So this is what ALDA is now, but it was started 20 years ago. I hope everything will enjoy this meeting today, and I will try also to participate later and answer in any questions. So once again, nice and interesting discussion. I wish nice and interesting discussion for all of you, and thank you for attending and participating.
Thank you, Oriano. Thank you very much for your support. I think it's also very symbolic that a Croatian president is supporting the path of Western Balkans towards the European Union. Now, also without further ado, I would give the floor to Antonella Valmorbida to present all the achievements that we had in the last 20 years of activities. Antonella?
Thank you very much, Ivana. Welcome to our first part of celebration of the 20th anniversary of ALDA. We went through the full sets of activities in the first part of the year. So of course, we wanted to do more and celebrate in Croatia, but we will catch up also in the future. For us, it's a very special seminar because, of course, Western Balkans is the raison d'être of ALDA. And so we have a very strong connection, both with people, with our local democracy agencies, and a lot of friends and a lot of plans. See here our presentation. So yes, sustainability, resilience, and participation is our plan for Europe and for the neighborhood. But we are very, very happy to share with you something new, which is coming up ahead of us. Of course, we are catching up with the tasks. We won't change our mission, but empower it. So local democracy and community empowerment is our plan, and we are introducing some innovation, which is also seen in our logo. So let me introduce to you our new logo. Here we are. So this is the new format of ALDA. On the left-hand side, you have the past logo that we decided 20 years ago. And on the right-hand side, we have our new logo. We thought about this new communication style a little bit. I will share with you which were our thoughts. So we have a lowercase for being closer to the citizens. We have an asterisk, which is connecting and referring to all our experience and topics and thoughts. And of course, we will have our line, which will go around our documents and around our projects for connecting people and actions. We don't forget, of course, our very strong European affiliation. So we will also play with our logo with yellow and blue. And we want to thank also the Linus and company that helped us to develop this logo, and it's a whole communication brand that will be soon on all our communication tools. We also branded our 20th anniversary reports and activities, and now a little bit of insights. Yes, so all the data that I'm sharing with you today will be part of our 20th anniversary report that will be published and presented in the fall. We are planning to have our General Assembly anyway in Brussels, hopefully in October. So during the European Week of Regions, together with the Committee of the Regions, so we are happy to match this this event in presence or virtually. We will see. A bit of data, as I said. So yes, 20 years of activities. We started, as Oriano said, in the Balkans, including myself. Unfortunately, it was during the war, of course. But then we also worked all together to develop the future of this region and to be part of a broader Europe. We have 350 members and more, association and local authorities, civil society group, and more than 1,000 partners. ALDA is a very operational organization. Like this year, 2019, or last year rather, we had more than 60 projects on the run. We have 15 local democracy agencies and quite a few of them in the Balkans, with 3 operational partners in Croatia and 5 coordination offices. One of them, of course, is the office of Ivana in Skopje. Well, that's the boxes where we can display figures for our first 10 years of activities, because we published a report in 2010, and we are piling up with our second decade. So let's have a look at the full 20 years of activities. So in figures, we are very proud and excited to share with you the data. So it's 425 projects implemented. We have managed directly about 42 million euros. We have addressed directly, and that's quite a thrilling figure, more than 2 million people. So really taking part in our activities, and on a broader sense, like 25 million people have benefited from our activities. So we want to show you the project distribution. So to show to all of you that that has been an intense and constant work. So those are the number of projects per year. So as you can see, we have been on the road and working with our members and partners constantly. And of course, these data are referred to the last 10 years. So we had a more in-depth analysis of this last 10 years. Yes. So data from 2010 to 2019. So you see the development of the budget. So in these last 10 years, we managed 323 projects with 31.5 million euros. Maybe interesting part is the box on the right hand side. So as you can see, out of these 31 million euros, you can see that ALDA is implementing directly activities, but is also allocating more than 55% of the budgets to local democracy agencies and to members and partners. So we have this potential of disseminating the resources that we are having. We tried a very difficult exercise for organizations like ours, and all the people online know what I mean. We tried to give a title to our project and our activities. So to explain what are the topics of our action. So the main one, 26% of our projects are dedicated to mobilization of civil society and active partnership and citizenship. We have also good local governance, 21%, with 140 projects on empowerment of local governments and good local governance. And then further on, education and youth, a big package. And we have here with us also our friends from Belgrade, with whom we are implementing a very important project. On youth in the Balkans and further on. So we try to articulate our activities. There are, of course, newcomers with big projects on migration issues and also some other topics, all very important for us. So, of course, here we have a nice memory that we want to share with you. This is, of course, ALDA is full of people, full of photos. We had to select one, and this is to pay the tribute of the mayor of Gdansk, the city of Poland, who was assassinated a year ago. A very good friend of ours, Pavel Adamovic, who is next to me on the picture and who really was a hero of local democracy and integration. This event was a citizens panel in Gdansk where we had guests from Belarus and from Ukraine. So this is a memory of a very good and, you know, friend of ours, but also inspiration for all of us. Right, activities and location. So also for the last 10 years of activities, where did we implement projects? Also in this case, this is rather an estimation because most of our activities are often implemented in several places at the same time. But actually we try to trace them, and we have a big presence in the EU, of course, 65% where we have more our members. But as you can see, it's good. We have a lot of activities in Southeast Europe, of course, in Western Balkans, as I said, which is our second home. We also tried, and this is quite an exercise, we tried to understand how do we work and what do we do when it means working in ALDA. So we try to make package of activities like training and capacity building, which actually represent the biggest package of activities. So that's our a very big role of ours. Then we have conferences, coordination meetings, publication and advocacy awareness, workshops, and so on. We have a growing part of the activities. So regranting, which is this subgranting of smaller projects, which is also included in the work with the compact with our projects led by our friends from Belgrade, and that Nataša will mention to you today, the compact. We also have an important subgranting component, which is more and more important in ALDA because of the management capacities that we have. Oh, that's a very nice also scheme. We don't see very much the Balkans because they are two small countries, but there are figures on the countries of Western Balkans, believe me. So they are grouped there. I should highlight more the numbers, but there are plenty of partners that we work with in the Balkans, so that you can see how it's widespread, our organization. Of course, this is a very important slide. We cannot miss it. So we are all working in a framework, which is the framework given by the Sustainable Development Goals. So our activities are in particular targeting those development goals: quality education, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, sustainable cities and communities, reduced inequalities, climate action, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and partnership for the goals. So a multi-level and multilateral approach in partnership. So in the past, and especially in the future, the activities of ALDA, even if they are implemented in several places, they will be framed within the log framework of the Sustainable Development Goals. Very nice slides. So we are also very proud to present to you our activity report 2019, which is very nice, full of pictures and activities, and it is already presented on our website and full of activities. Look at this fantastic picture. It's the first page of our Local Democracy Agency's report, which is also full of activities of our 15 LDAs. This is the picture of the city of Chefchaouen, which is the blue city in Morocco. And my colleagues were all wearing blue clothes. This is our last LDA open in the northern of Morocco in Tétouan. So we would like you to invite you to have a look at our global local democracy agency report. So this is for the start. More will be in our full 20th anniversary report, which will be out in the fall. Thank you, Ivana. I give you back the floor.
Thank you, Antonella, and thank you, Oriano, for reminding us actually the starts and the whole history of ALDA that actually started in the Balkans. The story of ALDA started in the Balkans, and we are very happy for this new logo that gives a new energy to the process in general. And I would also mention something that is very important for ALDA and for the LDAs in the Balkans. Last year, we actually registered a network that is called Balkan Network for Local Democracy. That is a result of a long cooperation between the local democracy agencies and ALDA and other stakeholders present in Western Balkans. And with this network, we are trying to support the process of local democracy, all the democratic processes in Western Balkans, especially the questions of European integration. So before giving the floor to the keynote speakers, I would just briefly would like to give you an explanation why we chose this topic for our region. As I said, there are 4 webinars that are taking place to celebrate ALDA's anniversary. And when we were making the decision, what is the topic that will mark our topic of the Western Balkans, our geographical scope? Of course, the European integration is something that is inevitable, something that is the priority and the strategy for all the Western Balkan countries, and also it is one of the priorities of the European Union to accept eventually all the Western Balkans within the family. We work with ALDA, with the Balkan Network for Local Democracy. We work for support of non-state actors within the process of EU integration. I'm speaking here not only about the local authorities, but also the civil society organizations. And actually one of the main projects that we're implementing currently is the project Regional Youth Compact for Europe. Maybe Nataša will mention it later, and this webinar is organized within this regional project where we support the local authorities and civil society to enter into this process. But while working on local level and discussing on this topic, we realized that even though the civil society organizations little by little find their place within the EU integration process, especially in the Berlin process that needs to support the regional cooperation, the place of the local authorities is not that visible actually. They are the invisible actors, let's say, of the EU integration, even though they are the main implementers of the acquis communautaire as soon as we enter into the European Union, and also they are responsible for management of EU funds. They are the main interlocutor with the citizens. Their place in the EU integration process remains limited. This is why actually our future actions will be even more on this topic, and this is why the discussion of today, it's very important to nurture our thoughts about where are we headed in the future years. So I would first like to invite Mr. Andrej Zernovski, the Deputy Minister from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Republic of North Macedonia. Not only North Macedonia has the presidency over the Berlin process, but also Andrej Zernovski is a friend of ALDA because he's a former mayor from the municipality of Centar, a member of ALDA since several years, with whom we have implemented several regional activities. Mr. Zernovski, can you tell us a little bit more about the priorities of the presidency of the Republic of North Macedonia and the Berlin process, or even your opinion concerning the place of local authorities in these processes?
Ivana, благодарам много, hvala puno, fali me derit. Thank you very much. First of all, let me say hello to the ALDA president, so Mr. Otočan. Then, of course, to the ALDA Secretary General, Madam Valmorbida. Then, of course, to the our guest from DG NEAR, Mr. Wolfe. It gives me, of course, great pleasure to have the opportunity, not only on behalf of the, let's say, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of North Macedonia, also the government of North Macedonia, but actually, as Ivana, you mentioned, on behalf of the joint presidency of the North Macedonia and Bulgaria, presidency of the Berlin process, to take floor during your event. It's a very important event for us, and that's why, once again, I'm flattered to be here on this occasion. First of all, of course, let me congratulate you, the anniversary of 20 years existence, and promoting, I would say, good governance and citizens activism across local community, and which is very important at grassroots level. As everybody mentioned, local democracy is of utmost importance if democratic governance is to be, let's say, sustainable, effective, and reflecting citizens' will, needs, and aspirations of the citizen. And for democracy, let's say, to breathe, it is of the utmost to foster the bottom-up approach, which is very important, and we are all trying to do that, which is instrumental for multi-tiered decision-making process. And the evolution is power, of power, let's say, is key, which is reflected within the wider EU system of governance, where local, also regional, but also other subnational authorities have their say in policymaking. And we relied on this approach within 2020 Berlin process, joint presidency of, as I mentioned, joint presidency of North Macedonia and Bulgaria, applying the principle of all inclusiveness and absorbing regional views within the program design of the presidency in order to reflect other than before citizen interest. And preparing for the joint presidency, we actually aim to visit all capitals of Western Balkans 6, which was unfortunately prevented by the COVID-19 pandemics. And however, we managed to exchange views and opinions with regional partners and stakeholders at meetings of different formats. And I am quite convinced to say that actually it's tailored of a solid and effective agenda for the joint presidency. It is clear that it offers, once again, clear prospects for the inclusion of regional views in the broader agenda while working together towards credible and, I would say, tangible deliveries. Our joint presidency represents a new pattern for the first time, that is important to mention, involving a European Union candidate country, which is North Macedonia, signifying a strengthened regional ownership. So we have one country that is already EU and one country that is a candidate country, and it's a very important signal not only to us as a country, but to the whole region, actually. And the COVID-19 crisis added to the uncertainty and, I would say, unpredictability, burdening the region, but also the whole European continent. And it also challenged the program design of the joint presidency because, of course, we have to address that issue. But despite the difficulties incited by the COVID-19 crisis within the imposed limits and certain adoptions, we are focusing on the enforcement and streamlining of the key priorities, such as the facilitating movement within the region, which is very important, then based on all inclusiveness, reinvigorated the agenda for the regional economic area, that is the MAPRI, and providing impetus to the provisions of the Roma Declaration adopted in, as we all know, in Poznan last year. Now, the new reality actually requires accommodation to the agenda in the search for a much needed strategic approach for all of us. We need special strategy for this and adequate facilitation of today's big challenge. Hence, it will include topics related to the let's hope now, post-COVID-19 economic recovery of the region, because we are all facing that problem. Ranges from transport and green corridors, mutual aid to public health. And as my friends discussed before, our agenda had to be narrowed down and streamlined to the most important priorities, preventing greater focus to other areas of importance of other local topics, inclusive the role of the local authorities. And however, it is very important for us that the local and regional views, our interests were certainly taken on board when drafting this agenda. And we have to follow this, all of us, not only we as a joint presidency, but all of us very, very carefully. To be honest, we see the Berlin process as a platform facilitating regional cooperation. And as such, it definitely represents a complementary mechanism helping the region in accomplishing the EU objectives. Both coordination teams from Bulgaria and from North Macedonia side have regular, I would say, and very often meetings between ourselves, and it's a very good cooperation. And that cooperation allowed us to, let's say, predisposition for a prophylactic and effective agenda for all our activities. And Ivana, I will conclude with this. As you mentioned, I was, before I entered in Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I was mayor of, the name is Center, as the center municipality of Skopje. It's one of the biggest and largest municipalities in Skopje. And that's why I'm very aware of the importance of the local authorities. And the local authorities, of course, are the first citizens, I would say, the first citizens interlocutors, and I was witnessing that, to respond to their needs and problems. It's always the local authority that is the first on mind of every citizen when you're going outside of your home. It's the first authority that you're dealing with. And that's why the local authorities, I think that makes them the most, let's say, suitable promoters of actual EU values. And the local authorities are main stakeholders in important processes in the Western Balkans, and such as public administration reform, a fight against corruption, and etc. So I will end with the conclusion that the local authorities are, let's say, pillars of social dimension at the local level to provide social services to all citizens and to ensure cohesion and cooperation of all stakeholders. By supporting local initiatives, I think that they will become, let's say, catalysts of local economic development. So once again, it was a privilege to talk to you, to share our experience. This is very important for us to have joint presence, and thank you for all of your support, and looking forward for next cooperation.
Thank you, Mr. Zernovski, and it's an interesting concept actually for co-presidency with Bulgaria, and especially now where the European Union is actually trying to, with this Berlin process and all the other processes, to support regional cooperation and also support of good neighborly relations. That is a key actually for the EU accession process. Our second speaker is Mr. Colin Wolfe. I'm sorry, very sorry if I pronounce it differently, your name. I'm not familiar with the pronunciation. Thank you very much for being with us today. So Mr. Colin is actually working in the European Union, in the European Commission, in DG NEAR, responsible for, he's the head of unit for regional cooperation in the Western Balkans. So, Mr. Colin, I've mentioned at the beginning that the process of EU integration needs to be inclusive to other stakeholders, especially the non-state actors, in order to not to centralize it among the central government. I've seen that the local authorities are less present than the civil society. But what is your opinion? What are the programs that the DG NEAR is undertaking to support the regional cooperation and to include other actors in the process?
Well, good afternoon, Madam Moderator. You pronounced my name perfectly, so thank you for that. And good afternoon to the President and the Secretary General of ALDA, and my distinguished panelists, co-panelists. It's a real privilege to be with you this afternoon. Congratulations to ALDA on your 20th anniversary, and I listened with great care to what Mrs. Valmorbida had to say about your achievements, and indeed very impressive indeed, and very, very important voice on the scene. And I did notice your new logo and how is sort of, I think, liaised so nicely with what we do and what we want to convey in Europe. I was just taking the opportunity, if you like, because it's an anniversary, also maybe just to say a little bit about where we are in relation to the overall EU-Western Balkans relationship. And because it's an anniversary, it's sometimes useful to look back a year and where we were a year ago or 2 years ago, whatever, and look at where we are today. And I think it is really interesting in relation to the Western Balkans overall. I know, Ivana, this is a bit broader than what you asked me, but nevertheless, I think it's really important to underline. Because a year ago, I'm not so sure that the, how should I say, prognosis in terms of that relationship was always in the most positive way. But what we've had, and it's important to underline it since then, is I think, first of all, a new commission coming into office, which gives much more priority to the Western Balkans and EU-Western Balkans relationship, and sees Western Balkans as part of Europe. We've had, I think, significant moves forward in relation to the opening of negotiations with Albania, and congratulations to you, Deputy Minister, also, of course, with North Macedonia. And we've had the chance to look at what we call in this bureaucratic way, the methodology for the negotiations for all the countries, and I think we've been able to make that more political and more immediate, and let's hope a way of making it advance more quickly, more dynamically. And I think too we have had a number of I think important, first in May, an important summit. It went ahead. It was to have been in Zagreb, a virtual summit, which it brings together all the EU leaders, the Western Balkans leaders. I think there were people who said, is it going to be, how is it going to work in a virtual situation? I think out of it came really interesting and important sort of renewed commitment on all sides to working on this relationship in the most positive way. And then indeed, Mr. Zernovski, you mentioned that we will be coming in the autumn on the Commission side with first this regional economic area upgraded or rebooted or revamped, which I think is very important, bringing together all the different economic actors in the Western Balkans region. But also we will come as the Commission with an economic and investment plan, an economic boosting plan for the region, a communication we are planning for the end of September. And that we hope, Mr. Zernovski, will indeed be taken up at the joint Bulgaria-North Macedonia presidency Berlin process event in Sofia not long after that. And that's important too, because I think it does mean extra resources for the region. It gives it greater opportunities to integrate into EU programs, initiatives, and I think has some very, very interesting ideas being developed in relation to digital transformation, the, how shall I say, a smarter economy, the green agenda, and so it goes. And one last thing, you know, it is the case, of course, we're living through difficult times. And I think sometimes that it both makes it challenging for us, but it also brings out some important sort of almost truths or important matters for us. And one of the things that I think it is worth underlining is that in terms of Western Balkans EU solidarity, first of all, I think I'll mention it on the EU side. There was a really significant reprogramming and reorientation of funding to address the immediate crisis and also to assist the economic recovery. This package that was announced at the end of April of 3.3 billion euros. But also, and it was very much noticed, many, I think, important acts of solidarity from Western Balkans to the EU, whether it was provision of equipment, whether it was provision of other support. I mean, for example, the most, I think, important of all, in terms of, for example, people sending medical personnel to the really stricken spots in Italy and so on. Very much, I think, it's more than just valued, it's really noticed, and it's really, really appreciated. So we come to local authorities. Where do you play your, how did the local authorities play a role in this, how shall I say, redynamized, I think, relationship? I think you're quite right, and it's so good that you're paying attention to this in this webinar. I mean, it's very clear, as a lot of people made clear in the introductions, that local authorities, they have a big role to play in the lives of everyday people. It's local service provision, it's local involvement in education, in planning, in transport, mobility issues, in environment, and it goes on in social services, economic development, and so on. And I think, I mean, I've worked in this area in other parts of my time in the European Commission. This is recognized, and very much so within the EU, maybe increasingly so, that local authorities play an absolutely crucial role in achieving first of all, EU policy objectives from this direction coming in from the EU level, but also in, I think, as Mr. Zernovski mentioned, the bottom up, making sure that those policies are indeed understood and valued and are developed by the people in the localities, the municipalities, in the rural areas and in the urban areas. And I think too that all of this, it's something that we recognize both in a sort of a how should I say, very much a sort of conceptual way and in a practical way. And I think we need to look at this in the context of multi-layered governance and the interaction between the national, the regional and the local levels. You know all this. It's something that I think we will be increasingly looking at in the context of our work in the Western Balkans as we go forward. Now, you asked me to, how can local authorities be included in the Berlin process? I've said, I think, recognition of the importance of local authorities. Now, in a more sort of specific way, how can you be involved in those discussions and that political engagement and commitment? And I think one of the things I would say is, in a sense, there are many topics there, and it's for local authorities to claim the topics that are most of relevance to you. And I'm thinking, but it should be even more, and I'm sure you are thinking, I'm thinking of things like environment matters, and clearly the green agenda is absolutely moving up in terms of importance. I think in terms of valuing heritage, environmental heritage for sure, but also cultural and how shall I say, overall traditional heritage. I think that's something that local authorities are particularly well placed to do. Then I think looking at how that is not only something that brings people together and it should be valued of itself, but is also important in terms of opportunities, commercial opportunities through better amenities, through better touristic and leisure opportunities, through better investment and business opportunities in general. And that brings me to, and I think local authorities play a big part in this, creating a welcoming business environment, where I think as urban levelers, local levelers, that it's very, very possible to make the local level particularly friendly and welcoming to both creating business by the people within the region, but also in welcoming in investors from further afield. And then you've got all the other matters, including local mobility, including local social care, and especially the work that I think the European Union has always much valued, and certainly it's something that's very much of concern in relation to our regional programming and the programming in general in the region, in terms of looking after vulnerable groups, whether that be minorities or whether that be in relation to people who have been displaced during the conflicts, or whether it's in relation. And it's also in relation, as you mentioned, Ivana, to young people and to other groups that, how shall I say, want to make sure that their voice and their shaping of events can be accommodated. So how can local authorities be included in the Berlin process? Take these topics, play the more active role, and I think you will find that the Berlin process and those in it are going to be very, how shall I say, welcoming and supportive of that. And then the last question that I understood that we can perhaps address is in terms of all this, if these initiatives are taken on our side at the big level, at your side, in terms of these very, very important key topics for Berlin process, how can we make sure that there is indeed a good dialogue as that's ongoing in relation to that relationship between the Berlin process, this strategic direction, and the local decision makers who are most active in the interaction with the citizens. And I mean, it's hardly, how should I say, it's to develop a partnership. And I think we have experience of that. We've done that well in the EU. We've done that well through organizations like yourselves. You will find, as you did, I hope, in the EU context, that the European Union and the Commission is very open to this. And that I think this mindset too is increasingly being transferred from the context of the EU to the Western Balkans. And you will find in what we've said, I think, much more of an acknowledgement of the important political and economic and social and other role played by local authorities in the Western Balkans and in movement, the progress towards accession. So I think what we want to do is, as much as possible, to support that. One of the things that we're looking at very closely at the moment is how we can work in a more sort of specific, structured way with local authorities. In a sense, I mean, we always use these terms like governance and capacity and what, but I think, as we have done very often in the context of the national level, to look at how we can replicate that in terms of working in an absolutely constructive and partnership way with local authorities. And there's a specific local governance facility currently under discussion in relation to that, which I certainly hope very much we can take forward, which will be, I think, a way in which we can provide a framework for what you're looking for. And I'll close, Ivana, by just saying that I would be delighted if Deputy Minister Zernovski, and good luck in the elections that are coming very shortly in your country, but we would look very much forward to taking this as a topic, and you've got maybe the opportunity to make sure it's on the agenda in the summit, the Berlin Process Summit in Sofia at the end of October, the beginning of November, once the date is set. We would be very, very interested in being able to follow through on that. So thank you very much, and I have great optimism going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wolfe. It was a pleasure actually to hear you, and thank you for addressing the inevitable question of the COVID-19 and how this influences our work. Mr. Zernovski mentioned the role of local authorities in the social questions, and you also mentioned the role that the local authorities could have in different topics, especially in the local economic development, which would be more than necessary in this current and future times. I would, in any case, address this need and this willingness to work with local authorities in the Berlin process, in the EU questions, and all the recommendations from this panel will be transferred to the decision makers. In any case, thank you very much again. I would like now to give the floor to Mrs. Nataša Vučković. Nataša, it's a turbulent period in Serbia, both the whole Balkans, not only the COVID, but everything that is going on. Can you tell us a little bit more about the situation in the Balkans related to the EU integration processes?
Thank you, Ivana. Thank you very much. And it's a big pleasure to participate at this webinar today. And I would like to express my most sincere congratulations to ALDA for marking 20 years of work, motivating citizens to participate, taking part in defining their present and their future, and promoting good governance. And it is a really great honor and pleasure for me to have known Antonella Valmorbida, Oriano, Otočan, and all other colleagues, and to have been working with you in the last few years. ALDA has been working in the Western Balkans for many years, focusing on local democracy and promoting EU values. And it is with Balkan Network for Local Democracy that my Center for Democracy Foundation works on a joint regional project. Ivana and Antonella already mentioned it. It is Regional Youth Compact for Europe, which we call RICE, as abbreviated. And it is a project that has gathered a consortium of 14 European and Western Balkan partners, including a number of local democracy agencies. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank them all for a wonderful cooperation and fruitful exchange on this important project, which where we focused on youth in the region. This project is based on our conviction that it is so much important that we work with young people in the region, first to open perspectives for them, to motivate them to stay here in these times with great demographic challenges, and also in an effort to strengthen their capacities to continue the reforms and to take the lead in the reforms in our region. That is what our project wants to achieve, and that is why we focus particularly on the issues that are covered with the negotiating chapters 23, because we think that fundamental rights are something that the young people in the region are very much interested for. And also, of course, the chapter number 19, where we speak with them on the issues of employment, social policy, social development, and social resilience, because that is also what is of the utmost importance for the young people in the region. I was asked to make some kind of a short overview of the situation of European integration in the Western Balkans. I would just like to, I'm very much persuaded that you all followed the latest developments, but let me just say some, share with you some basic information on the state of affairs in regards to each of the Western Balkan countries. As you probably know, Montenegro has opened the last chapter in the accession process at this last European Council, at which Serbia, however, did not open any of the new chapters. It was expected that chapter number 2, freedom of movement, would be open, but it didn't happen. And it is, as we find, a consequence of the finding of the last EU non-paper, which says that Serbia has to accelerate reforms in judicial independence, rule of law, fight against corruption, media freedom, and so on. It is very important to stress that we all look forward for the opening of accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania. And it is very encouraging what we heard recently from the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who says that prospect of accession to the Western Balkans is one of the priorities of Germany's Council presidency. And she said that Berlin wants the European bloc to open the first chapters with Albania and North Macedonia this year. We all in the RISE project and in this consortium, we keep our fingers crossed that this really happens this year, because we think that it is of the utmost importance for the overall EU integration process in the Western Balkans. There are some good news from Bosnia and Herzegovina, if I may say, that comes from Mostar. It is expected that new local elections in Mostar will take place this year, and that is something that we shall all greet, and that is very important for local democracy in Western Balkans. In Kosovo, we still await the outcome in regard to visa liberalization, as you all know. The new methodology on accession negotiations has been introduce at the beginning of this year, and it is expected that it is actually agreed that North Macedonia and Albania will apply this new methodology. Montenegro also said that it would welcome it. And the good news from yesterday evening is that the President of Serbia stated last night that he informed President of France, Emmanuel Macron, that Serbia also accepts the new methodology in negotiations with the EU. It is a very important change, and not only in methodology, but we think also in the way the political dialogue between the Western Balkan countries on one side and European Union bodies will take place in future, because the negotiation process is going to be organized within different clusters and grouped chapters. What are the key challenges for all our countries, including also the level of our local governments and local level activities? I think that we all agree, and we can see that also when we read at least the last year EU reports on Western Balkan countries. It is that there is a significant democracy deficiency in Western Balkan countries, and it is also stated that there is a state capture, a widespread big corruption, and that in some of them we see shrinking freedoms, freedom of media, there is a decay of democratic institutions, particularly parliaments, and that electoral processes need really significant improvements. It is very important that the EU does not trade stability for democracy, because this has in a way eroded the awareness among the citizens in some of our countries that reforming our internal states and governments and harmonization of our laws with EU laws will bring to some improvements in the areas which are relevant for everyday life of citizens, which is also the rule of law, the human rights, and democratic standards. That is very important. We have now a very big challenge, which is that the COVID crisis has in a way contributed to the strengthening of the state. Particularly in healthcare systems, but also in some security measures and individual freedoms and so on. And we really need to have strong political partners that are devoted to EU values, civic movements also to get on board, and have civil society organizations as partners, because the question is how to make the democratic institutions more resilient. We all face significant economic and social problems together with demographic challenges, and this is something that we have to address now within this COVID crisis with particular new, innovative, and with big commitment in view of the fact that we are facing, particularly when the government measures will expire at the beginning of autumn, it is expected that there will be big loss of jobs, rise of poverty, and that we will have particularly high social problems. It is very, the question for the civil society organizations is how to adapt to new COVID and post-COVID situation. And my conviction is that we have to continue monitoring of the reforms, that we have to report on new citizens' needs in times of crisis, that we have to get organized, particularly on local level, so as to improve participants-oriented debates on impact of reforms, participations of citizens, and so on. We have also to engage more vigorously in promoting EU values, and particularly in direct contact with citizens, where local level of activity is so important. We also have to make EU contribution, financial contribution, much more visible. I think that this is very important for our European partners, but it is also very important for what we want to achieve in our countries, because there are more and more actors, foreign actors in our region, and there is a continuing lack of information on how much actually the European Union contributes to development in our region, and very often contributions of some other actors are made much more visible, and we insist much more on them. That is very important, I think. On local level, it is very important that we show that the quality of life in local communities comes with the EU values and EU policies that are undertaken and implemented at local level. I think that it is very important that we create platforms for dialogue with state and non-state actors, so as to make citizens' voices more heard. In our RISE project, we call this multi-stakeholders platforms, but this is very important a manner of addressing the local problems. We have to strengthen the capacities of state and non-state actors to monitor reform policies and to monitor the government performances. It is here very important to raise our capacity to discover all kind of fake news and to strengthen transparency by strengthening, of course, the independent media, because good communication and fight against fake news is very important in our struggle to make EU more present and to make that citizens really support the EU reforms. It is very often mentioned that when we have established in Serbia the National Convention on the EU, which is the large umbrella organization that gathers now 700 organizations, we try to find the way how to link those centrally based organizations with the locally based organizations. It is very important that this link exists. And it is also important by involving local organizations in monitoring reforms, in monitoring EU integration process, to make the language of our communication acceptable and comprehensible to citizens. Because very often, even the civil society organizations overtake the bureaucratic language that is usual and normal in our communication with the EU partners, but when we try to communicate this to citizens, it actually, we have some kind of closed doors because it doesn't pass the barrier in this communication. And I often remember, and I will close with this, when Neven Mimica was the speaker of the Croatian parliament, I learned one very important lesson from him. He said, in the European integration process, there are three levels of actions. The first one is political dialogue with the EU and EU bodies. The second one is domestic reforms. And the third one is communication. And I think that here, local organizations, our activities on local level are crucial on how we will communicate the European integration process, the regional cooperation, and the fight against the COVID crisis and the consequences of COVID crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nataša, for explaining to us the situation, actually, the current state of the European affairs, the challenges that we are facing as Western Balkan countries, and what is actually to be done, especially the overview over communication and the importance of the local level between especially the engagement of local civil society organizations and local authorities as main stakeholders that are close to the citizens. Thank you very much. I have some questions here. I would like to tell you that we are going to address them at the end, as soon as the last keynote speaker has spoken, if you agree with this. So I would give the floor to Mr. Nikola Dobroslavić. He is the prefect of the county Neretva Dubrovnik county from Croatia, and he represents the Committee of the Regions. Actually, he is the representative of the Committee of the Regions. Mr. Dobroslavić.
Thank you very much. I hope you hear me. It is a pleasure to be with you today in a virtual way from Dubrovnik. Greeting first to Mr. Oriano Otočan, ALDA's president, and to Mrs. Antonella Valmorbida, the Secretary General, and of course to all of you. As the president of the Croatian National Delegation to the European Committee of the Regions and chair of the COR's working group for the Western Balkans, I have high esteem for the engagement of the European Association for Local Democracy with the local authorities in the Western Balkans. All 6 countries of the Western Balkans are candidates or potential candidates for the membership in the European Union. They are in different stages of their EU integration, but for every one of them, cooperation with the EU is essential. I would like to emphasize the 3 points. Recent EU decision to open accession negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia is a good news for all, not only for these 2 countries. I'm glad that it happened on 25th of March during Croatian presidency of the Council of the EU. EU integration is not only about economic integration and access to the EU funds. It is about European values, fundamental rights, freedom and democracy at all levels, rule of law, good governance, and social market economy. It is about choosing cooperation over conflict. Coming from a country that joined the EU most recently of all the member states, and from the region bordering with the Western Balkans, I understand very well the challenges of the EU integration process. The COR is the voice of municipalities, cities, and regions in the EU. It is only natural that we strongly engage with the enlargement countries. As we like to repeat in the COR, about 70% of the EU laws are implemented at the local level. That is why the accession process necessitates strengthening the capacity of local administration. Primary tool of the COR's engagement with the local and regional authorities in the Western Balkans are our joint consultative committees and working groups. Committee of the Regions has 3 joint consultative committees with the 3 Balkan countries, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia. We also have 2 working groups for cooperation with the Western Balkans and with Turkey. The first one, of which I recently became the chair, deals with the relations with Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Kosovo. Joint consultative committees and working groups share the same basic purpose: encourage cooperation between the local and regional authorities from the EU member states and Western Balkans, exchange best practices and views, and help subnational authorities in the Balkans 6 to better prepare for the EU integration. All of these bodies have 5-year work programs corresponding with the COR mandate. Core topics are the same for all of them: local democracy, good governance, rule of law, and fundamental rights, environment protection, climate action and energy, local economic development, demographic and social issues, and of course, cross-border cooperation. Usually, joint consultative committees and the working groups for Western Balkans hold 2 meetings per year, one during the first semester in Brussels, and the second one hosted by our partners in the Western Balkans. In Brussels, meetings of these bodies are held simultaneously. The following day, they all meet together. That is the Enlargement Day, a central annual EU event devoted to enlargement in Brussels. The President of the Committee of the Regions opens the event. In the last couple of years, the Committee of the Regions has regularly drawn an opinion on the annual European Commission's enlargement package, containing progress reports on the Western Balkans countries. This year, unfortunately, due to coronavirus crisis, the Committee of the Regions had to cancel the Enlargement Day. We hope that we will be able to hold the autumn meetings in the Balkans normally. Last working group, Western Balkans, meeting was held in Mostar in October 2019. The body gave its contribution to the resolution of a long-standing problem of Mostar, where there have been no local elections for 11 years. I also personally engaged in that respect. After the recent agreement of the 2 leading Croat and Bosniak politicians in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Mr. Čović and Mr. Izetbegović, we can reasonably hope that the local elections in Mostar will be held before the end of this year. I will share with you a couple of points from the COR draft opinion, for which I am the Rapporteur General. It is the opinion on local democracy challenges in the Western Balkans. The opinion is done at the request of the Croatian presidency. The plan was to discuss and adopt it at the core plenary in May 2020, but due to corona crisis, we can only hope it will be adopted in October. The opinion deals with the so-called local state capture. It is a very negative phenomenon, existing, of course, also outside the Western Balkans, but is quite present and widespread in the region. When the public procurement, local authorities, financial resources, employment and promotion in local administration, and even information are under strict control of a small group, usually around the mayor, we talk about local state capture. The laws and regulations are in most cases formally respected, but there is no real freedom, local democracy or competition. Some of the measures I suggested for fighting this deformation are greater engagement of the joint consultative committees, working group for Western Balkans, the Committee of the Regions as a whole, and other EU institutions. More EU support to local stakeholders, working to promote local democracy and the rule of law, such as so-called watchdog organizations. Much more attention by the European Commission to real situation on the ground at local level as an integral and important part of the EU integration process. I believe new accession negotiations methodology is a step in that direction. Finally, not to finish on this rather gloomy note, let me say that we all believe in the future of all of the Western Balkan countries in the EU, but it requires a lot of hard work also in the EU, but much, much more in the Balkan countries. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dobroslavić. It's very interesting explanation of how the direct cooperation between the EU institutions as a Committee of the Regions and decision makers from local level from Western Balkan countries is happening and what should be done on local level. Interesting point about this local state capture, and this is something that it's the pillar actually of the local democracy. First, ensuring democratic functioning of the local institutions, that then they will support active citizens' participation. Very interesting point of view, and also it's a pleasure to have you among us in the participants. I know that the Croatian presidency happened in the most unusual times, let's say, but it was not an obstacle for the EU institutions to grant start of the negotiating talks, actually, to show the willingness to accept North Macedonia and Albania into the EU family. So this is a good point of how practical and we could be actually when there is a political will, and also this will is confirmed by the new presidency. Now Germany has put the Western Balkans on the agenda, so I think we are on the good path, but with a lot of things to do be done on local level, as our speakers have shared with us. So we have some questions that are asked by one of the by the participants, and I will address them now. So we have one question that is addressed to the panelists in general. Do you think that the crisis of multilateral institutions can or should strengthen cooperation between local authorities in Europe, connecting them in building networks to defend democracy and European values? So Vesna Marjanovic is asking this question. I will repeat the question, and please, for the ones that would like to contribute. So do you think that the crisis of the multilateral institutions can or should strengthen cooperation between local authorities in Europe, connecting them in building networks to defend democracy and European values?
It is important always to cooperate, nevertheless, of the crisis. I don't think that we have a big crisis of multilateral institution. We have new challenges, and if we speak about new challenges, then there is a need also to adapt to new challenges, to find new way how to work. And that's if somebody is referring now to the EU institution, that's the problem. But I don't think this is a problem of the institution, it's a problem of the new challenges, and the institution has to adapt on this. But nevertheless, so this always is very important to cooperate on the local and regional level. And I would like just to remind that President Dobroslavić is also president of Adriatic and Ionian Euroregion. That's a nice experience, experience how to work together in different countries, because this Euro region has been founded by more than 20, I think now there are 27 or 26 regions and cities as members from the 7 different countries. Countries from the EU, countries which are not in the EU, which are in the some level of accession process. But I think always is very important to find a way to cooperate on the all level. So national level, regional level, and on the local level, and of course international cooperation is necessary also for non-governmental organization.
Thank you, Mr. Otočan. Any other comment from the other speakers? Maybe Nataša or Mr. Wolfe? Yes, please, Nataša.
Yes, I completely agree with Oriano, Otočan, and I would also like just to stress that I think that this COVID crisis is sending us a message for all of us in the region that there are new paths of cooperation that we have to, how to say, to grab, to create, to where we shall invest. It's not only the health issues, but also the transportation issues. Also, we're going to, we will have to address so many issues that are now, there is a trend that some issues are regionally governed and managed. And I think that we shall first map these possibilities, the needs, identify the needs, and then find the actors that will work in this area. What very often in the Center for Democracy Foundation, because we focus very much on economic and social rights and economic and social development, particularly in the area of labor, we find that in view of demographic challenges in the Western Balkan regions, there is a big gap in addressing the labor market issues in the Western Balkan, and that there is a space for a lot of cooperation in that regard. So I think that we should be also, as Antonella said at the beginning, in regard to ALDA, but we shall also invest in innovation approaches. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nataša. Mr. Wolfe, you wanted to?
Yes, I mean, it was a very interesting question. It had me thinking. I would very much, I think, take a similar line to Oriana and to Nataša. It's just, I think, too, that the crisis, of course, it will bring moments when we find it difficult to act together. But it seems, if you look at it, that there's also quite a deal of, you can call it pressure almost, or a benefit that has become obvious about working together. It was, I think, clear in Western Balkans itself when the crisis hit, that there was a sense of solidarity, of, I think, coming together around really important matters, even if there are still differences. Certainly that was remarked on by those of us who work with the region and looking at it from the EU or other perspectives. I think too that it's pretty clear that in reacting or dealing with the crisis, that there's huge benefits in doing this multilaterally, whether, I mean, the contribution of World Health Organization or other cooperations that are needed. It's not the only way, unfortunately, that the different countries in the world have sought to do it, but I think that it's clear that really to seriously tackle the crisis, we've got to act with this perspective. And I would hope, this is to go to the period after the immediate health crisis, and let's hope we can move to this, but we will have the whole issue of an economic and a sustainable recovery that at the EU level, and we would hope that this also includes Western Balkans, that we can indeed very much work together and already have been reflecting on working together, and that's the most effective way to go forward. Now, it's of course the case that in arriving at these discussions, we will have our differences. As it's interesting that in most ways, I think we do find a compromise and strengthen that compromise, and in the end, a more effective addressing of the issues. So I mean, of course, it's like Oriano, you said, it's a question of challenges, and that will always mean that we will have our differences before we settle to addressing things more collectively. But I think that's maybe the value of multilateral organizations, that they allow us to accommodate those differences and show us the strengths of being able to do things together. Certainly, I think in the European Union side, we'd like to very much how shall I say, encourage, facilitate and support that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colin. There are two questions currently. One of them is for Mr. Dobroslavić. The question is, how can we motivate local institutions to cooperate with civil society organizations in EU matters? So to do it more, how can we motivate more the local institutions to do so? So Mr. Dobroslavić, and later if the other keynote speakers can want to share something on this matter.
Thank you for the question. I think it's important to stress that when we see the process of negotiation to the accession to the EU, we primarily think it's a task, it's an issue of a national state, which is of course true. But we would like, as representatives of the local and regional authorities, and as members of the Committee of the Regions, we would always like to include, to engage much more local and regional authorities in the process. So we always try to find the way how the local and regional authorities should have a say in this process. It is very important because it is not only the state level, member state level, it's also important for regional, local level, and of course for all our citizens. So I think we have to do more to include local and regional authorities in this process. And of course, as it was in the question, it is very important to have close cooperation with the associations, with the media, because as we all know, if something is not publicly known, it's scarcely known.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dobroslavić. This is actually what we are doing in ALDA, especially in supporting the cooperation between the civil society organizations and local authorities, so that they jointly actually contribute to the EU integration process. And it's a long path actually to go through, but it's in any case the most sustainable approach, I would say. We have a question from Agron from Albania. He wants to know, actually it's more a comment, but maybe you would like to react, the panelists could react. It is to prepare any goodness of local government units, how to prepare the strategy roadmap towards the Berlin process. So Mr. Colin Wolfe mentioned actually this bottom-up and up-bottom approach. So maybe the panelists could tell us about their opinion of how the local authorities could get organized and what kind of roadmap we could imagine in order to go more in details into this EU integration process.
Maybe I can just, it's certainly not, for me at the sort of Brussels level to say for sure, but it does strike me that given that clearly, you know, the Berlin process and the EU-Western Balkans relationship, it's very much now focusing on these new priorities, whether it's digital transformation, whether it's the green agenda, whether it's, as we phrase it, economy for the people, which I think is both a, how should I say, a more inclusive and smarter business approach. That these are surely, I think, points that you can take up and contribute to. And it strikes me that local authorities are going to have a great deal to contribute on all of those things. Let's say the digital transformation, and we're talking about with the provision of digital services, public services. I think that's clearly something where local authorities will have, you have the important statistic of 70% of services being provided to the public at local level. And the whole provision of those, I think it must have potential to be done increasingly online. And then I think there's also, how should I say, very, very interesting local opportunities in terms of developing digital business, or better, I mean, first of all, businesses becoming more digitally savvy, but also in terms of promotion of those businesses in terms of online publicity and online accessibility and so on. And then, I mean, when it comes to so much in relation to the green agenda, it would strike me that the small is beautiful approach, where you do for sure by sort of a amalgamation of many local activities come to something that's really worthwhile at the in terms of improving the environmental situation and heritage. So all of these things are where I would see there's a very big sort of cross over between what your interests are and what the interests that have been outlined as prioritized at the Berlin process or the overall process level much more, really to interact. And of course, I guess networking and finding a sort of more amplified voice together on that is groupings or whatever, that would be very good as well, because that will, I think, really emphasize, or how should I say, really make the voice heard and make the interaction really profitable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wolfe. I think that surprisingly, we have reached almost the end of our webinar, because the time flies actually when we speak about important topics. We have tackled many, many questions, especially on the challenges of Western Balkans and all the new challenges ahead of us that are partly because of the COVID-19 challenges and partly because of the challenges that we had previously. So there is it's a time for innovation, as you said, and transformation of our region. But thank you very much for your speeches. I would now give the floor to Mrs. Antonella Valmorbida, the Secretary General of ALDA, for the closure of this webinar.
Thank you very much, Ivana. Thank you all for your contribution, the panelists and the participants. We are using these webinars also to complete our strategy for the upcoming months and years, and to learn from each other. So just, we will soon display for you like a flower of priorities that we will put in place in ALDA with the local democracy agencies. But let me comment them before we move forward. Just to make everyone aware and to be clear about that, on its political stand, ALDA has always and repeatedly confirmed that for us, the plan is to have Western Balkans member of the European Union. So for us, that's the plan. And we are working for that, helping both the process in Western Balkans and also in the EU. Because as we correctly said, those are homeworks in Western Balkans to be done, but we also need to make this big plan aware at the European level, and why this is important also for the European family, that the Western Balkans can be part of our big project. I think that a couple of things before we move on with my flower, and also responding to some of these proposals that you all and all our very distinguished guests shared with us. Of course, we know what has been going in the Western Balkans in these last 20 more years. So it has not been easy, to say the truth. It's a constant fight for stability, democracy, fight against stagnation, very few step ahead and quite many step backwards. So I think that Nataša mentioned the demographic challenge, which is an economic challenge as well. I think that all together we need to, and I think this is our role too, we need to really develop a new plan and a new dream for these countries. And they need to visualize together what's their future. And that's really something that we can start from below, from, you know, give them a sense of belonging, a genuine sense of belonging, which is quite tricky in the Balkans, because that has been through nationalism, which was quite naughty. So this genuine sense of belonging and investment in my own community is something that ALDA is investing on. And we have a lot to learn from you. And I come back to this issue of what Colin mentioned, this dimension of solidarity, which is something new. Why? Because this COVID-19 has also, you know, created a challenge for the very spoiled EU citizens that in a couple of weeks discovered the unthinkable. So we discovered that out there it's dangerous, that it's, you know, we were stopped in our civic rights, in our liberties. And that has created a major change, while we know that in the Balkans, you had a lot of these very difficult times. And I've been involved in this as well. So the fact that us in Europe for a moment, we experienced how hard can be life, you know, and it can be dangerous and it can be complicated, created a new balance and a new possibility. And as Colin mentioned, you know, we, because in Europe we have a lot of people from the Balkans, new bridges of solidarity were created. So to a certain extent, we felt the closeness much more than before, because we experienced something new. So this bridge of, you know, experiencing the hard part of life and economy and society was something new, and that opens new possibilities. A new last point, and I think I will respond to Nataša when it comes to media and information. Oh my God, how much we went through that in this period of time. Because by sitting at home, all the information was actually mediated. So our life was going through media, in the sense that there was something between me and the reality. So that was the role of the media. There is me in my room, and there is the reality out there. And there is someone telling me how the reality is, because I cannot travel, I cannot go, I don't see with my eyes. And the importance of information was immense, because it was about, you know, getting the virus, knowing how to move, job, transport, and so on and so forth. And of course, we realized how dangerous are fake news. And not only because of the relationship between Russia and Europe, something very abstract to many people, not to us, because we know what we are talking about, but it was in our life. And all together in a minute, we realized how dangerous are fake news. And this is, and these, you know, mental constructions that a lot of people are manipulating. And I know that this is very important for you in Western Balkans, because as Nikola mentioned, and as Nataša mentioned, we have to deal with citizens that need to respond with their mind prepared and not manipulated by you know, manipulative media. And this relationship between the Balkans and the EU is into this. I would like to say that also to conclude, this is our flower, and we hope that these keywords, we will work with all of you friends in Western Balkans, in Croatia, already in the EU, but still in Western Balkans, with our friends from Bosnia and Herzegovina, from Serbia, from Northern Macedonia, from Kosovo, and from Albania, and from Montenegro, of course. We are going to work together on those flowers that we see here. Connecting, we need to be connected, and networks are really a key. We need to create bridges, and our line in our new logo will be the connector between local communities, local experiences, and also, as we said, between the upper level and the lower level. And also our colleagues from Northern Macedonia, the Vice Minister being with us, mentioned that. We want to be also really clear. We need to work on inclusive communities, and that's going to be a big fight, even more than before. Because in a situation of crisis like this one, there are two blocks of people. Those who are able to navigate the crisis because they have a good job, a good position, they are intellectually ready to do that, they have a little bit of money in the bank, and they navigate through this period till when it will be better. And there are the others, and these weak ones, because they are minorities, because they are migrants, because they are a bit in this kind of society which are living and expecting the end of the day to get being paid. We really need to include them. Otherwise, the gap will become larger and larger and larger, and creating an enormous friction in the society. Resilient communities, as we said, and as all of our speakers mentioned, local communities, local authorities, and citizens and civil society needs to work together to react, because they are those who are delivering services, and they need to be ready to react today and tomorrow to crisis, and they need to get ready for that. So it means to develop flexibility, resilience, emergency measures, plans, programming, and governance, because never as it is today, the governance is important. Local economic development is extremely important, because we need to make sure that good governance is actually connected to local economic development. And it's one package, and we need to make it clear, because as correctly our friend from Dubrovnik mentioned, you know, if there is not good governance, and that means being entangled in a network of insane environments, that will have an enormous impact on the economy. That means cutting off the middle class, cutting off normal enterprises and jobs. Reconnecting with Europe, and that's a message also for Colin. We need to be back on the track with this European project. We need to strengthen it, and I think it's actually going to be very much, you know, the flagship of the next upcoming years. Why? Because we realize that before and without the European projects, there is no hope. Even for the big states of Europe, even for the richest one. So we need to reconnect all together our European projects and our European dream. Without this, there will be very little hope to overcome the big challenges of the future, which are, of course, there from tomorrow, from September, from 2021 on. And the last point, which is also very important for our keywords for the future, I'm sure you all very much agree, it's about the environmental and climate challenges. we realized, and of course it was boiling, but now we, in 45 days or 100 days, however long as have been our lockdowns, we realized that environment and the world and the nature is challenging us. And we cannot pretend that all will be okay, tutto andrà bene, as we say in Italian. And that was the slogan mentioned before the lockdown, you know. So we need to invest for the longer generation, because it was, of course, a wake-up call for all of us. And that's it from my side. I would like to thank our panelists, our president, of course, to give us time for this moment, all our partners, and still our 46 participants after 2 hours of talks, that we will invest on Western Balkans. We cannot wait to visiting you soon again in Skopje, in Dubrovnik, of course, one of the most beautiful cities of the Adriatic, and also in Belgrade and in the region. Thank you very much.